Albert Anastasia. On the morning of October 25th, 1957, Albert Anastasia walked into the barber shop of the Park Sheraton Hotel on 7th Avenue in Manhattan. He was 55 years old. He was the boss of what would later be called the Gambino crime family. He was also the most feared man in organized crime, a man who had personally ordered hundreds of murders as the head of Murder Incorporated, the Mafia's official killing arm throughout the 1930s and 1940s. They called him the Lord High Executioner. He once ordered a hit on a man he'd never met because the man was a potential witness in a case that didn't involve him. That's how Anastasia operated. He didn't wait for problems to arrive. He eliminated the possibility of problems. He eliminated people the way an accountant eliminates line items, efficiently, without sentiment. For 20 years, his name was the last thing people heard before they stopped hearing anything. He sat down in chair number 4. He always sat in chair number 4. He draped a hot towel over his face and closed his eyes. The barber, Arthur Grasso, began lathering his neck. 2 men walked in through the front entrance. Nobody stopped them. Nobody asked questions. The hotel lobby was crowded. The barbershop had 5 other customers. None of that mattered. The 2 gunmen moved quickly. One carried a .38 revolver. The other carried a .32 automatic. They pushed past the barber and opened fire at point-blank range. Anastasia, even half blinded by the hot towel, I didn't die sitting down. He lunged out of the chair and threw himself at his attackers. But what he was swinging at were their reflections in the barbershop mirror. The bullets had already done their work. He collapsed face first onto the tile floor, his barber's cape still around his neck, shaving cream still on his jaw. 5 rounds in total, 2 in the back of the head, 1 in the left hand, 2 in the hip. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. The barber stood frozen, holding his straight razor. The other customers sat in their chairs, unable to move. The gunmen walked out through the lobby, past the front desk, and onto 7th Avenue, where they disappeared into Midtown foot traffic. Nobody followed them. The man who had made thousands of people disappear was killed in a place where people come to look at themselves in a mirror. He died staring at his own reflection. The hit was ordered by Vito Genovese and carried out with the approval of Carlo Gambino, Anastasia's own underboss. The man he trusted most signed the order. In the Mafia, the knife always comes from the chair next to yours. Paul Castellano. On December 16th, 1985, Paul Castellano stepped out of a black Lincoln Town car in front of Sparks Steakhouse on East 46th Street in Manhattan. It was 5:26 p.m. The Christmas lights on the block were already on. Shoppers were carrying bags. The sidewalk was crowded the way Midtown always is in December. Castellano was 70 years old, the boss of the Gambino family, the most powerful crime family in America. He wore a dark overcoat and walked with the unhurried pace of a man who believed he was untouchable. His driver and underboss, Thomas Bilotti, stepped out of the car behind him. Neither man made it to the restaurant door. 4 men in long trench coats and fur hats were waiting on the sidewalk. They had been standing there for 20 minutes, blending into the holiday crowd like shoppers waiting for a cab. As Castellano reached the curb, all 4 drew semi-automatic pistols and opened fire simultaneously. Castellano took 6 bullets, 3 to the head. He fell backward onto the sidewalk. Bilotti drew his weapon but never fired. He was hit multiple times and collapsed next to the car, his blood pooling on the asphalt and mixing with the slush from an earlier snowfall. Ada, a woman carrying Christmas presents, screamed. A taxi driver stopped in the middle of the street. People stood on the sidewalk staring at 2 bodies on the ground in front of a steakhouse, and for a few seconds nobody moved because the human brain doesn't process what it's not expecting to see. Then the chaos started. Sirens, crowds, news cameras that would replay the footage for the next 30 years. The shooters walked calmly to a waiting car on the corner. They didn't run. Running draws attention. They walked. The car pulled away and turned east toward the FDR Drive. The entire assassination took 8 seconds. Across the street, sitting in a dark car with a clear view of the entrance, was John Gotti. He watched the whole thing. He had planned it for months. Every detail, the location, the timing, the fur hats that made identification impossible from a distance. Within 24 hours, Gotti would install himself as the new boss of the Gambino family. He would become the most famous mobster in America. He was also, from that moment forward, a dead man walking. The commission would remember what he did. You don't kill a boss without permission. It took them 17 years, but they got him. He died of throat cancer in a federal prison cell in 2002. Alone, unable to speak. The man who ordered the most public mob hit in history spent his last months in silence. Carmine Galante. On July 12th, 1979, while Carmine Galante sat down for lunch at Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant on Knickerbocker Avenue in Bushwick, Brooklyn. He was 69 years old. He was acting boss of the Bonanno crime family, and he had spent the last year making enemies the way most people make small talk. He had seized control of the heroin trade in New York, cutting out other families who had been earning from it for decades. He had ignored the commission's authority. He had threatened anyone who questioned him. The other four families had decided, collectively and quietly, that Galante was a problem that needed a permanent solution. Galante ordered fish. He sat at a table in the outdoor patio area behind the restaurant, a small garden enclosed by a wooden fence. 3 of his men were with him, his bodyguards. Cesare Bonventre and Baldo Amato stood nearby. The lunch was relaxed. Galante ate slowly. He lit a cigar after his meal, an expensive one. He leaned back in his chair. At approximately 2:45 p.m., 3 men wearing ski masks entered through the restaurant's rear entrance. They carried shotguns and a handgun. The attack was fast and overwhelming. Galante was hit multiple times in the chest and face at close range. He fell backward in his chair, landing on the patio stones. The cigar was still clenched between his teeth. That image, captured by a police photographer an hour later, became one of the most iconic crime scene photos in American history. A dead boss on a restaurant patio with a cigar still in his mouth, eyes open, staring at a sky he no longer had access to. His bodyguards, Bonventre and Amato, were not hit. They stood perfectly still during the shooting. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't flinch. They had been paid to step aside. The men assigned to protect him were the men who opened the door. Galante had survived prison. He had survived deportation attempts. He had survived a shotgun blast to the face in 1943 that left him partially disfigured. He survived everything except the one thing no boss survives. The moment you believe you're too powerful to be killed is the moment the people around you start planning how. Angelo Bruno. On March 21st, 1980, Angelo Bruno sat in the passenger seat of a Chevrolet parked outside his home at 934 Snyder Avenue in South Philadelphia. He was 69 years old. He had run the Philadelphia crime family for 21 years. Longer than almost any boss in American history. They called him the Gentle Don. He didn't allow drug dealing in his territory. He solved disputes through conversation, not violence. He was a man who believed that the old ways still worked. Negotiation, respect, patience. For 2 decades, his family operated with minimal violence and consistent earnings. The other families respected him. Law enforcement considered him a stabilizing presence. His own men prospered. Then the heroin economy exploded and everything Bruno stood for became a liability. His captains watched millions of dollars flow through New York and they wanted in. Bruno said no. He said it calmly, the way he said everything. No drugs. Not in my city. The younger members of his organization saw a man standing in front of a river of money with his arms crossed. They saw an obstacle. His consigliere, Antonio Caponigro, decided that a new direction required a new boss. Bruno returned home that evening from a dinner meeting. His driver, John Stanfa, parked the car and kept the engine running. Bruno sat quietly. He may have been thinking about dinner. He may have been thinking about nothing. A man approached from behind the car. He pressed a shotgun against the back of Bruno's head, directly behind his right ear, and fired once. A single blast. Bruno slumped forward against the dashboard. The cigar he had been holding fell into his lap. Stanfa claimed he saw nothing, heard nothing. He was later convicted of perjury because you can't sit 18 inches from a shotgun blast and hear nothing. Caponigro, the man who ordered the hit, believed the commission would approve the move after the fact. He was wrong. The commission had not authorized the killing. Within a month, Caponigro was found in the trunk of a car in the Bronx. He had been tortured. His body showed over 200 stab wounds. Bills were stuffed in every opening of his body. A message. You came for the money. Here it is. The Gentle Don's death triggered a war in Philadelphia that lasted 5 years and killed 28 people. The man who kept the peace was killed because peace wasn't profitable enough. Everything he built to prevent violence became the thing that caused it the moment he was gone. His funeral was attended by hundreds. Men in dark suits stood in a church and listened to a priest talk about mercy, and every man in every pew knew that mercy had been removed from the business. The night a shotgun pressed against the back of a quiet man's head, outside his own home on a street where his neighbors knew his name, Sam Giancana. On June 19th, 1975, Sam Giancana stood in the basement kitchen of his home at 1147 South Winona Avenue in Oak Park, Illinois. He was 67 years old. He was frying sausage and peppers. He was also the former boss of the Chicago outfit, the most powerful organized crime syndicate between New York and Los Angeles. He had controlled politicians, judges, unions, casinos, and an entertainment empire that stretched from Las Vegas to Hollywood. He had shared a mistress with President John F. Kennedy. Her name was Judith Campbell Exner. Odd. She carried messages between the mob boss and the President of the United States, and nobody in either organization questioned the arrangement because at that level, the Mafia and the White House were not enemies. They were business partners with different letterheads. Giancana had been recruited by the CIA to assassinate Fidel Castro. Operation Mongoose. The agency provided poison pills and exploding cigars, and Giancana provided the contacts in Havana. The operation failed. Castro lived. But the relationship between organized crime and American intelligence didn't end. It just moved into rooms that were harder to find. He had operated at a level where the Mafia and the United States government became indistinguishable. Now, he was frying sausage in his basement at 10:30 at night. That's what a retirement looks like when your profession doesn't offer pensions. Giancana had recently returned from an 8-year exile in Mexico, where the outfit had sent him after his connections to the CIA and the Kennedys drew too much federal attention. He was back in Chicago, and he was a problem. A Senate committee called the Church Committee was investigating CIA involvement in foreign assassination plots, and Giancana had been subpoenaed to testify. The men who ran the outfit now, the men who had taken over while he was in Mexico, understood what the testimony could mean. Giancana knew about the Castro plots. He knew about the Kennedy connections. He knew where the line between organized crime and the United States government blurred into nothing. That knowledge was a death sentence with a hearing date attached. Someone he trusted entered the house that night. There was no forced entry, no broken windows, no alarm. Giancana was shot once in the back of the head with a .22 caliber pistol while he stood at the stove. He fell to the floor. The killer then stood over him and fired 6 more rounds into his face and neck in a tight circle pattern. A professional grouping. Close range, personal. The sausage burned on the stove. When police arrived, the kitchen smelled like gunpowder and overcooked meat. The man who had conspired with presidents and intelligence agencies and controlled a criminal empire worth billions died in a basement kitchen, face down on linoleum next to a stove. No one was ever charged. The murder remains officially unsolved. The Church Committee never got his testimony. The secrets he carried went into the ground with him. 7 shots. The first one killed him. The other 6 were a message. We don't just want you dead, we want what you know dead too. If you like these kinds of stories, please subscribe because it really means a lot to me. See you in the next one.